Hey besties, it's Sarah. Welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be sharing my top 10 books of 2022. I am so excited to share this list. I feel like this year has been my best reading year in a very long time. I read 95 books. Yeah, you heard me right. I almost read 100 books. Not quite 100, but almost there. This year I only gave 14 books 5 stars. 4 of those books were sequels to some of the ones on this list. So I'm giving you the 10 books that Sarah without an H gave 5 stars, which is very rare. I do not hand those out very often. And I've decided to rank this list. I don't normally do that, but this year I thought long and hard about how these books would rank. So I am giving you the concrete ranking, 10 to number 1. So let's just get into book number 10, The Christmas Wish by Lindsay Kelk. This is a very recent read. I read it for that vlog where I read a bunch of Christmas romances when I was trying to get into the Christmas spirit. Spoiler alert, I mostly hated everything in that vlog except for this and like one other book. This is a little bit of like a Groundhog Day sort of story. In it, we have our girl Gwen. She's a lawyer. In most things in her life, she's fairly successful, but recently her boyfriend was cheating on her and he broke up with her and she's been devastated, and she recently got suspended from work and things are just not going really well, and she hasn't really been sharing a lot of details with her family, and she's normally very into Christmas, but this year she's not feeling it. And so she goes to her family's home like she normally does, and when she gets there she has this really chaotic day, and then when she goes to sleep the next day she wakes up and the day repeats. And so this is just her going through Christmas like 10 different times, and I loved it so much. This book is British and it has impeccable humor. I laughed so much while I was reading this. I don't normally giggle or guffaw or chuckle while I'm reading, but this one genuinely had me laughing out loud. I actually went to go get my car detailed and I was listening to this on audio, and I was like in the lobby waiting for my car and I was like laughing, and whenever the guy came to give me like an update about my car I had to take my AirPods out and I was clearly like laughing to myself. But that's fine because this book was worth it. It was so good. I loved it so much. I know I am recommending it after Christmas, but if you want to maybe like save a book for next December, or if you're okay with reading a Christmas book in January, then I would highly recommend this. I love this so much. I will say you do need to enjoy Groundhog Day type stories. I love that sort of trope. Like I love any movie or book that implements that. Not all of them do it well, but this one I feel like really did. So I really enjoyed this. Coming in at number 9, we have The Patient by Jasper DeWitt. This is a horror novella that I absolutely adored. I actually read it on Halloween. So in this book we have a guy that's a psychiatrist and he is new at working at this specific mental hospital, and when he gets there he finds out that they have one patient who has been there since he was 6 years old and no one is allowed to treat him. He is isolated. He only has a few people that are allowed to go into his room, and overall he just has bad vibes. Like everyone in the hospital is afraid of him and they're just like, we will not tell you what the deal is with this guy. And so our main character is like, I'm new to the job, but I definitely know everything, so I think you guys should allow me to treat him because I think I'll be the person that gets through to him. I feel like this story was the perfect length. It was also told in a sort of like subreddit format where the guy is posting on a forum telling everyone the story, and then in between there's different comments and questions from people who are reading it, and he's like bit by bit giving it to us like after the fact. And so it's just really good. I loved it so much. I'm a huge Reddit reader, and so I really liked this format. I actually believe this started as a story on Reddit and then he made it into a novel because it got really popular. Jasper DeWitt actually commented on my vlog where I read this, which kind of freaked me out because I don't really like when authors like consume my content, but he said nice things because I said nice things, so it worked out. We're friends. Next up on our list, in slot number 8, we have a book that I read all the way back in January and I just loved it so much. I've thought about it all year. It's so good. Theft of Swords by Michael J. Sullivan. I read this for the vlog where I read other booktubers' favorites of last year, and Life as Monet actually listed this as an adult fantasy series that she absolutely loved last year, and so I was trying to kind of get into my adult fantasy era, so I thought it would be fun to read this, and I was so pleasantly surprised by how much I loved this. Adult fantasy has always been a genre that I've been nervous to dip my toe into. I used to read a lot of YA fantasy, but since I've moved over to only reading adult fantasy just seems like more daunting. Like they're always like this long and the world building is complex, and I'm always just like, I don't know if my brain can handle that. What I loved so much about Theft of Swords is that the world building is very straightforward, very easy to understand, and Michael J. Sullivan's writing is extremely accessible. This series was actually originally 6 books. The series is called the Rhaeria Revelations. I always struggle to say that, so I'm very grateful I said that in one take. Michael J. Sullivan originally self-published these, and then they got really popular, so he was able to re-release them as bind-ups. So you will find them now as a trilogy, and so each each book is a bind up of 2 books. So this is the first 2. I just read them all at once, so I just kind of consumed it as like one long book, but you could read them like in half if you wanted to. I don't really know why I felt the need to explain that, but the more you know. So in this series, we have our 2 main characters, Royce and Hadrian, and they are thieves and mercenaries for hire. So at the very beginning of this book, they get hired to do a job in a distant kingdom, and when they get there, they actually end up getting framed for the murder of the king. And so through a series of events, they actually have to kidnap the prince and run away so that they can prove their innocence. It's just like a lot of fun. That's sort of what the first half of this is about. The second half has to do with like a contest and some other stuff that happens after this first, but the politics and the intrigue and everything in this is so good. I really, really love how the world building is done because it's not too overwhelming, and the magic system is very simple because magic in this world is almost extinct. So a lot of people don't even believe in magic anymore. So magic is very, very slowly introduced to us. So it's not super confusing. Mostly it's just trying to understand the politics with like the church versus the kings versus the kingdoms and all that sort of stuff. And I just loved it so much. I love a thief. Like I love like an Ocean's 11 type moment. So Royce and Hadrian are just like my favorite characters ever. And there's just so much going on in this series. I love it so much. I still haven't read the 3rd book in the trilogy, but I have read the first 2 and I loved them so much. Like flawless. Like Michael J. Sullivan knows what he's doing, and I'm really excited to read more from him because I know he has some other series. It's just iconic, like genuinely iconic. Coming in at number 7, we have another horror book, and that is The Hollow Places by T. Kingfisher. T. Kingfisher got so popular this year, and for very good reason. She is a flawless author. She writes in so many different genres. She writes cozy fantasy. She writes horror. She writes gothic retelling. She does whatever she wants. She is just like a flawless queen. So in this book, we have our main character, Kara, and she's recently gone through a divorce, and so she goes to live with her uncle, who owns a museum of oddities. He actually ends up injuring himself at the beginning of the book, so she has to take care of his museum while he's away. And while he's away, when she's sort of like organizing things, categorizing things, she comes across this hole in the wall, and it leads to this other world where there are all these like hills and like spooky vibes and just sort of like cosmic horror-esque things. I loved this so much because T. Kingfisher has such a way of scaring you with what she's writing, but also making you laugh. I don't think that's for everyone, but for me, I really loved it because I loved the juxtaposition of those feelings where I'm genuinely being like, what the fuck is going on? I'm really scared, but also being like, haha, you're so funny and witty. Like I love that. Also, can we talk about this British cover? Like that is iconic. Like it looks so good. It really matches the vibes of the book. I cannot wait to read more by T. Kingfisher. I know that she's showing up on a lot of people's favorites list this year for various different books. The next book shook me to my core because I did not expect to love it so much. I actually read it for the vlog where I gave authors I hate a second chance. Like who knew that I would be the girl that loves this book? Like I was bamboozled. I was shocked. I could not believe my eyes. I could not believe my ears. Like I was like, I can't believe this. It's gotta be House of Earth and Blood by Sarah J. Maas. I am truly shooketh. I truly believed I would always be a Miss Sarah Jane Maas hater. I DNF'd Throne of Glass. I only read like 1.5 books of ACOTAR, and I was always there hating, being like, she's not very good. Why does everybody love her book so much? And then I read this, and my life changed. Like, am I gonna go back and read Throne of Glass and ACOTAR? No, because I still stand by my opinions on those books. They're definitely not my cup of tea when it comes to fantasy, but this, an urban fantasy dream. In this book, we have our iconic heroine, Bryce. She is half fae and just a badass overall. At the start of this, someone in Bryce's life is murdered, and it completely rocks her world and devastates her. And so we are shot 2 years into the future where she has just not been the same since this has happened, and she actually gets enlisted to find out what went on, and so she kind of has to play detective, and she partners up with this guy named Hunt, who is an angel. He kind of is like a cop detective like figure, and so they just work together. There's a slow burn romance. There's so many different fantasy creatures that are in this world. They're so fascinating. I love the world building in this. Like when I tell you I am the most shocked that I liked this, like yeah. And I know everyone and their mom has talked about this ad nauseum, so I won't spend too much more time on it, but I just want you to know that if you are looking for a new urban fantasy series and you don't mind reading Miss SJM, I would highly recommend this. I really, really liked it. I'm a little nervous to read the sequel because a lot of people said it's horrible, and it's actually ending up on a lot of people's worst of the years this year. Don't love that for me, but this first book, iconic. Everyone in this book, all the characters, iconic. Slow burn romance, detective work, iconic. Do I know any other words besides iconic? We'll never know. Coming in at number 5 is a book that both broke my heart and completed it. Like in my chest, this book just lives in it. I am not spoiling it by showing it to you already, but we are talking about Pachinko by Min Jin Lee. This book, like I don't even know how to explain it, truly like lives in my soul, in my bones, in my marrow. Like, I don't know how to describe it. I truly am just a random white girl who grew up in New Hampshire and has nothing to do with Korean or Japanese history, but something about this spoke to me so deeply. Like, this story took me on a ride. I feel like I was born with this, I lived with this, I died with this. Just simply iconic. We're gonna have to put a counter on the screen to see how many times I say iconic in this video. This is a sweeping, grand, heartbreaking generational story about a Korean family in the early 1900s. We start with our main character Sunja when she's about 17 and she gets pregnant out of wedlock, and so she is forced to marry a pastor who wants to move to Japan to further his ministry. So a lot of this takes place during the Japanese occupation of Korea, which was so fascinating to read about because that is not a period of history that I know a lot about. I am not typically a historical fiction girly, but this book, when I tell you, it took me to places. I learned so much, not only about history, but also about humans and people and feeling. I loved it so much, and it is just so heartbreaking. Heartbreaking is definitely one of the #1 words that I would use to describe this, because this is such a hard time for Koreans specifically living in Japan. They're not being treated like as full citizens, and there's a lot to be said about imperialism, and there's just so much to unpack in this, and I wept when I read this. I actually filmed my response after I finished reading this because I read this for the vlog where Monica Kim chose what I was going to read for TBR Takeover. It's probably one of the most impactful books I've ever read in my life. To be honest, I'm a little embarrassed that I put that on the internet, but I just needed everyone to know my genuine reaction to this book. I feel like I'm not saying anything too intellectual about this, but this is definitely just one of those books that will take you places. It's a lot about generational trauma. It's about history. It's about family. It's about just the things that go on between people. I will say one complaint that people have when they read this book is that #1, it's really long. It's like really long, like this is a big boy. And then #2, there are a lot of times where we don't completely follow the story of each character, so we sort of jump around. It's a little like anecdotal or in vignettes, if you will, and so I could see how that would annoy some people, and there definitely were times that I wanted to know more about certain characters, but overall I just felt so touched by this family and I wanted to know so much about them, and I'm really excited to watch the adaptation that is on Apple TV. I feel like that is going to be so iconic. You knew I was gonna say that word. You knew. So another era that I tried to be in this year was being a classics girly, and so I successfully read all of Jane Austen's books for a vlog, and one book stood out to me. I feel like if you've been on my channel at all this year, you're gonna know which book I'm talking about because I literally hold 5 copies of it, but that is Persuasion. This is so good. This definitely belongs in 4th place on this list. Like, it was iconic. I tried to say a different word, but then iconic still came out. So in this book, we have Anne, and she's in her late 20s, and she's sort of considered a spinster. Her time has passed. Like, she's just kind of living in the countryside, and she is probably never gonna get married. So we learn very early on that when she was younger, like 18, 19, she had a beau named Captain Wentworth. At the time, he wasn't a captain, and everyone around her, like all the adults around her, were like, you should not marry him, like he's below you, like definitely like no. And so she gave up her first love, and she's always thought about him, and she's just single now. So he shows up into town again, and now he's a captain, and everybody's like, ooh, Captain Wentworth, he's sexy. And she's like, that's literally the man that I used to be engaged to. This is all about pining and different feelings between them because they believe that their love is lost. It's a second chance romance. There is one of the most, I'm sorry, I have to say the word iconic. I don't want to say iconic, but I have to say iconic. I don't know, what word should I say instead? There is one of the most romantic and iconic declarations of love in this. I will never get over when Captain Wentworth said, I am half agony, half hope. Like, if you've read it, you know. Let me say iconic. Let me say iconic. It's so iconic. I love it. I will say, if you want to try reading Jane Austen, I'm not sure if Persuasion is where you should start because this book is quite angsty and moody, and it doesn't have as much humor as her other books. So I feel like you would probably be better off reading Sense and Sensibility or Pride and Prejudice if you wanted to start with Jane Austen. But if you're into a sort of like angsty, lovelorn, second chance romance sort of vibe, I definitely think you would like Persuasion. But this tends to be one of people's least favorites. I don't know why, because obviously it's #1 for me. I loved all of Jane Austen's books except for one, which I'll talk about my worst books. When Worst Books comes out, you will hear about one of those Jane Austen books. But in general, I loved all of them, but this one just really took the cake for me. Is that a saying? Took the cake. Take the cake? Also, please do not speak to me about the Dakota Johnson Netflix adaptation because that is not my Anne Elliot. That is not my Persuasion. I do not want to be associated with that film. Coming in at 3rd place is another book that you guys are going to be able to guess because I have talked about it all year. It is truly a part of my personality now. Anne of Green Gables by Ellen Montgomery, baby. I loved this book so much. Anne is truly one of the most darling characters I have ever read about in my entire life. Like, this series is the epitome of cozy. Like, if you want to read a cozy classic that will just make your heart melt, this is the series for you. This is another book that I read for that vlog where I read booktubers favorites of last year. Ariel Bissett is actually the person who brought this up. I truly would have never read Anne of Green Gables if not for her. So the next time I see Ariel, I'm actually going to kiss her on her mouth. I probably actually won't do that because that's weird and I'd have to ask for consent, but I will hug her and thank her at length for introducing me to this series. So in this book, we have siblings, Marilla and Matthew, and they own a farm. They live together. They both have never been married. And so they decide that they want to adopt a child so that they can help them out on the farm. They're specifically looking for a boy to help them out. I will say that is forced child labor, and that's probably not why you should adopt children, but that's neither here nor there. This book was written a long time ago. There ends up being a mix-up at the orphanage, and so they end up sending Anne instead. And when she shows up, Marilla and Matthew simply fall in love with her because she is so precocious. She is so darling. She's just the sweetest character ever, and so they cannot send her back to the orphanage. They just decide to keep her. Probably better reasons for adopting a child, so they really had some character development there. And throughout this first book, we follow Anne from, I believe, like age 9 to like her mid-teens, and then each book in the series is a different portion of her life. 3 of the 14 books that I gave 5 stars this year were the sequels to this, and then the other 5-star was the sequel to Theft of Swords. So truly this top 10 are the books that I gave 5 stars, like truly iconic. I truly am gonna have to just check myself into jail the next time I say iconic. Like, take me away, officer, because I can't stop saying it. Like, it was kind of cute and fun at the beginning of the video, and now I'm getting mad at myself. Like, stop saying iconic. Also, I would be a bold-faced liar if I said that Anne didn't have anything to do with why I became a redhead. I have always wanted to have red hair because when I was a kid, people always said that Kirsten Dunst was my doppelganger, specifically when she was in Spider-Man, which was always weird to me because I've always had blonde hair, but people would always be like, you look like that girl from Spider-Man. So I've always felt like I could pull off red hair. And so this year I was reading this book and I was just loving it, and I was like, what if I was like a redhead like Anne? Also, everybody and their mom has been dyeing their hair red this year, so it gave me a lot of confidence to do it. But I am so glad because, like I said, Anne of Green Gables is a part of my personality, and now I have red hair and, you know, we're the same. Like, that's me on the cover. Now we are getting into the top 2, and these books are so good. Like, if you are gonna read anything that I recommend on this list, I pray that these 2 books would be the ones that you read because I love them so much. If Pachinko is my heart, this book completes my soul, and that is Half a Soul by Olivia Atwater. Do you see what I did there? This is the other half of my soul. So in this book, we have our main character, Dora, and when she's a child, she has a run-in with a fairy that ends up leaving her with only half her soul. And so essentially what that means is that her emotions are very deadened, and she has very odd reactions to social situations. And so we have her and her cousin traveling into London to be a part of the ton so that her cousin can find a husband. And so Dora's biggest wish is that she can just sort of be a wallflower and that no one will pay attention to her during this season. She actually ends up catching the eye of Elias, who is the king's magician, and so he finds out about her curse and he is trying to help her like figure out how to solve it. And it is a very sweet and darling romance between the 2 of them. I loved it so much. Like, I was giggling, I was grinning, I was smiling, I was just kicking my little feet while I was reading this. Like, I could not get over how cute this is. I love the banter between Dora and Elias, and I also love the Regency vibes. Like, if you like Bridgerton but you also like Faye, I feel like you would enjoy this. Let me just say it one more time, besties. Just let me say it. Don't arrest me, please. This is iconic. It's so good. Like, I loved it so much. I really hope that you guys will pick this up if you're into cozy fantasy at all. Like, if you're into Regency romance, like, oh, we love it. We love it. We love it. How many times can I say we love it? And whenever I say we, I mean me. I love it. But I'm just gonna assume we all love it. So we love it. All right, guys, coming in at number 1, drum roll please. The World Gives Way by Marissa Levian. I have talked about this book at great length this year on my channel, but honestly not enough. I need to talk about it more. This book is underrated. It is slept on. No one talks about it, and I'm here to change that because you guys need to know about this little book. I do not know what I would have done if this book hadn't come into my life. It was so random. When I was in New York, I went to a bookstore and they had blind dates with books, and I picked this up because I liked the little like promo on the front. It said detective work, slow burn romance, light sci-fi, cool world building, I was like, yeah, sign me up. And when I was checking out, the bookseller was like, yeah, I put that little book together. People don't talk about it enough. I'm so excited that you're picking it up. And if I go back to New York, I'm gonna kiss that man on the mouth. I'm actually not really gonna do that. I keep saying I'm gonna do that to people, and I don't know why I'm saying that, because I'm actually not gonna do that to people. But I will shake his hand and look him in the eye and say, thank you so much for putting me onto this book. It's set in the distant future after Earth has gone kaput. Like, no longer she's dead. When Earth was ending, all the rich people were like, we don't really want to die. That doesn't really seem like our vibe. So they hired a bunch of scientists and architects to build this giant ship. The ship is actually described as being the size of Switzerland. And on this ship, they have put all these different cities, bodies of water, different things for them to do. And the idea is that in 200 years, this ship is going to reach a new planet for them to live on. And so obviously these rich people getting on this ship are not going to be alive by the time they get there. And so they are sort of setting up their future generations to be able to live on a new planet. So they think to themselves, we don't really like doing our own laundry or like making our own food or doing any of this because we're rich people. So they say, hey, Polars, if you don't want to die when Earth is ending, you can come on the ship and we're going to do this whole thing called contract work. And essentially what that means is that everyone who comes on as a contract worker, all of their generations will remain like the help until they end up on this new planet. And that's when everyone can be free and make a new life. So it's essentially modern day slavery, kind of like an indentured servant. It's not the best time. And so our main character, Mira, is one of these contract workers, and she's fed up. She does not want to be a part of this. And so at the very start of the book, she is given an opportunity to run away. And so she sort of takes off and she's trying to find her freedom. And our other main character is this guy named Tobias, who is a detective, and he is assigned to her case. And so he is trying to hunt her down. There's a mystery happening, and it's a little bit of a cat and mouse chase. And it is just one of the most creative stories that I've ever read. I've never read anything like it. This book is really sad, but I loved it so much. One of the things that I saw people complain about is that they said that they felt like nothing happened in this book, but I could not disagree more. I feel like we really got into the minds of these characters and we learned so much about the ship. In between Tobias and Mira's chapters, we're given exposition that sort of describes the ship to us. And then also we have this chase between Mira and Tobias. And so I could not disagree more that nothing happens in this. I will say that the ending could be unsatisfactory for some people, but I just can't even imagine how else this book would end. Like, I felt so many feelings while I was reading this. I cried a lot, and then I also just was so enamored by the writing and the world building. It's just so delectable. Like, the writing made me salivate. It was so good. Like, I just felt like it was, can you guess the word I'm gonna say? Can you guess? Iconic. I am so sad that people do not talk about this book. I think there's only like 1,000 reviews on Goodreads, and it deserves so much more. I'm pretty sure it came out like last year or the year before. Like, when I read the back of this, I was not that excited about the plot, so I could kind of see, like, if you were at the bookstore, why you wouldn't pick this up. Also, the hardcover has like the ugliest cover I've ever seen. It kind of makes it look like it's like a Western or something. I don't really know what's going on there, but this one, I feel like this kind of more encapsulates like the vibes and the feeling, like with like being in space, and it's just like the purple, like the vibes. It was so good. I loved it so much. I don't really know what else I could say about this, but it was just iconic. I literally am going to jail immediately after this video ends. I'm going to prison. I'm gonna serve a lifetime sentence for repeatedly using the word iconic. I really hope that you guys pick this up because this one deserves it. No one talks about it, and she needs more love and attention. Marissa Levian, she did this. She made this. I would literally sell one of my kidneys on the black market if it meant this could be made into a limited series. Like, if HBO could do what they did for Station 11 with this, I would literally make out with them on the mouths, and I mean it this time. I would literally make out with every producer if they made this into a TV show. This is so perfect for like a short, limited TV series. It would be so good. Like, the world building is just, we need like big budget too. Like, this would be so good. I need more of you to read this so that they can adapt it, like, please. But that brings us to the end of this list. This is my top 10. These are the 10 books that I gave 5 out of 5 stars. Loved them so much. I am so happy that I had such a good reading year. Like, all of these books really meant something to me, and I loved reading them. They were so good. I can't stop thinking about how good and iconic they were. I'm literally gonna count up how many times I said iconic in this video, and I'm probably gonna need to get a gun. It's probably gonna be my 13th reason. Please, please, please let me know down below what your favorite books were of 2022. I would love to do a vlog where I read my subscribers' favorites. I'll probably also go over to Instagram and ask there as well, so maybe I can just sort of aggregate what everyone's favorites were, and I feel like that would be a really fun vlog to do next year. If you made it to the end of this video, feel free to use the salsa red dress lady in your comments, because I feel like the dress that I'm wearing kind of looks like that. Like, let me show you. Sorry, I fell. I just wanted to show you that I have like a little like slit in the dress and there's like ruffles. If you were to use the salsa lady in your comments, it would make sense, but that was a really weird clip that I just filmed, but that's fine. But anyway, leave that in your comment if you want, so I know that you made it to the end and you enjoyed this video. And I thank you guys so much for your support this year. You're all beautiful. Have a nice day.